what we're
Yeah,
talking
after the Last Crusade. Last Crusade was good.
I would just call it the crystal meth.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the
called.
Aftershow. We were just arguing about whether or not Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is legitimately part of the trilogy. Because there is no fourth movie. That is for certain.
You mean Indiana Jones and the Crystal Meth, as it was, which I like. I'm gonna use that now.
You're welcome.
There you go. All right, we are on. Duck, formerly known as Censor, has confirmed it. So, there we go. We're gonna be looking at this article. Autism is a feminist issue. I saw this and this headline, and it was old. It was from 2017. And I thought, well, it's a bit of an old. I saw it as actually a screenshot, and I did a search because I thought, well, I'll still find it. I haven't read it. Maybe it'll be fun to read, anyways. But this article is not the original.
By the
one.
way, I think the answer is yes. In the same way, Kryptonite is a Superman issue.
This came out in March of 2018, so it's not that old. The other one was like from last year. So, JP and Joe from the Channel 4 program Are You Autistic aired March 28th at 10 p.m. That's a show by Nikki Clark. This is iNews. I think this is a UK website because they spelled program with an M-E at the end. So, it must be. Oh, and it says that's
it's
right.
It's the difference between a television program and one of those flyers you get in the theater. One of those paper flyers you get in the theater outlining the synopsis. That's what we call a program with just one M and no E. It's weird.
That's interesting. We just do it. I think we just use the spelling with no ME for both. So maybe we confuse more people than you. All right, Nikki, what do you got to say? In 2008, when the United Nations declared 2 April World Autism Awareness Day. Wait. I get it now. This is British, so I'm getting some things wrong. In 2008, when the United Nations declared the 2nd of April World Autism Awareness Day, I was one of the only people in the UK to stage an event. I took over my town square with various stands and events, including running the first ever quiet shopping experience by asking the local shopping centers to open late so that autistic people and their families could enjoy less stressful shopping for 2 hours. All right, before I move on, are there any people here who either are autistic or knows a lot about autism? Like they have a friend or they've studied it or something like that?
I'm on the very functional end of that.
I did a test on the internet that said I was autistic to the nth degree and that I had cancer.
Really?
Yes.
I believe the second one, because you've been with us for a long time.
Yeah.
And feminism's cancer does rub off. I can attest to that.
I took that test. I took that test that Max linked everyone to in his series. I got a 26. Now 25, 26 is the cusp of maybe autistic. So yeah, that's my thing. I'm as socially awkward as you can get without having a medical excuse for it.
I think I had above 30 for this test.
Yeah, that's what happens with me. Every time I take a test, are you autistic, or are you on the autism spectrum, blah blah blah, I hit rather extreme on the test. And I think it's partly because there's overlap between autism and obsessive compulsive disorder. I don't think I'm as autistic as the testing keeps showing. I think if I was to be tested by a shrink, it wouldn't come out that way. Mm-hmm. But I also think if the diagnosis Asperger's had existed when I was in school, I would have been labeled with it. And so if you're looking for an answer on the shopping thing, it might be helpful. It would be helpful for some people, but it would be undermined by the fact that they know they're being singled out for that. Not undermined into oblivion, not undermined to not working, but that would be there, and that would be upsetting.
That's kind of where I am. I just find, because it's like I might be on the spectrum, but I'm not that bad.
And to be honest, I kind of like when I get into a store.
Diagnosed, and they said I was like on the almost not autistic side of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of there's a lot more diagnosis in the borderline area than there is in the extreme area. And most mental illnesses, most illnesses in general, the extreme end of it is kind of a rare thing. But in terms of the shopping thing, I sometimes I like when I go in and it's crowded as fuck in the store, because then the salespeople will all be busy with other folks, and I won't have to deal with someone asking if they can help me.
Yeah. I'm in those places where they're aggressively friendly and their goal is to make sure you walk out of there with something. I can't stand the pressure.
Oh my god!
And the thing is too,
they babysat us. We went to Best Buy because my son had gotten a Best Buy gift card from one of his teachers, and I swear to you, this is no exaggeration. Every fucking 30 seconds, a salesperson came over to us and asked us, if we could be helped. Or
about it.
They babysat us.
There's an advantage for guys in those situations because you can very creepily hit on the person and they will leave you alone.
If they're female,
I started getting rude with them.
It's even better if it's another guy.
Like, we had one moment where a guy comes over and talks to us, oh, can I help you with anything? Or let me know if you need anything. And as he's walking away, another one comes over to us. And as that one's walking away, a third one comes over to us. And the third one, I was like, you just saw the other two come over here and ask if they can. Don't even.
He's going to try his luck.
And he just looked at me like he was hurt. I'm like, I'm sorry, but this is getting ridiculous. We would like to have a conversation with each other about what we want to buy without any interference. We know what we're looking for. Go away.
Well, do it outside.
I was annoyed.
Yeah.
And I started giving them the evil eye. Don't you come over here. Don't you come over here.
And the worst
for you is this helping?
The worst part about it.
Excuse me, Hannah. Would you like some help with your?
Yeah. The worst part about it is that I used to work. I used to work in retail, and I don't envy those guys because they don't want to do that, but they have to do it. Like it's their they're in a position where they have to do that, and I had to do it.
It's part of loss prevention.
Yeah, even when I knew, because you could get a sense of whether or not a customer actually needs help or if they want to be left the fuck alone. And I knew when they didn't really need help, but there were rules in place where you had to approach and greet a person within a certain number of seconds of them entering the store. And then you had to follow up with them within a certain amount of time. And then when you got to help them, you had to try to sell them like the highest quality product and add-on sales and everything. And you were gauged by that. And this wasn't one of those businesses where you got a commission, where the encouragement came from the profits themselves. This was just for retail, where you got paid whether you sold something or not. And so and you didn't actually believe in the products that much. You didn't feel that strongly about what you were selling.
Do you know, in a way, I find that more nightmarish than any kind of factory or processing unit I could work in. Because I've worked in factories and shit, just standing by a machine, moving bits of wood and plastic around all day. But I would much rather do that than have to paint on a fake smile and sell something I don't give a fuck about.
Yes.
Don't work in a call center then.
Yeah, I got as far as telesales for some home improvement company. All I did was do it from the phone, and even that was soul draining, and I only did it for a month.
Yeah, the worst the machine can do is maul you.
I've worked a couple of retail jobs, and the one that I really, really liked, I worked at a camera store. We didn't have to do any of that. Like, we were to talk to people, and make sure that they were taken care of, make sure that they got what they needed and everything. But I was given a lot of latitude, and I had my goal as the goal that was given to me as by the store owner as a salesperson was to hook the customer up with the camera that was most likely to suit the needs that they communicated when they came in the store, not to upsell everything. But at the same time, I had to like anticipate they're gonna need this. Let's get it all together in one trip. And so I had a lot of return customers, and I built friendships with customers, and I had people that would come to the store because I was the only person they trusted to handle their negatives and that kind of thing. Whereas when I worked at CVS, when I worked at Speedway, when I worked at other retail places, I worked at a grocery store, it wasn't like that. And the upselling and the ridiculous requirement of talking to every single person that came in the store, whether they wanted to talk to you or not, actually caused problems rather than being helpful.
I was at a music retail store, and they kind of did that, where they're like, there's these two, this one's more expensive, but if you're just not really, if you're not that dedicated, then going with the lower end would be fine. Where it's like, it didn't really feel like there was pressure to buy the more expensive one.
Yeah, when you want to try to get return customers back for your establishment, the thing you need to do is make sure that they're happy with what they get, not that they buy the most expensive thing or the latest, greatest, next best thing, but that they buy the thing if they buy something, it's going to be the thing that is actually going to suit their needs the most. But you don't get that from a lot of places anymore. It's one of the reasons I hate shopping. I absolutely hate shopping. So maybe the quiet store experience is a good thing for the autistic, but I don't necessarily think that's a feminist thing. I think that is more of this person had the capacity to recognize a need and strove to meet that need. And anybody can do that. You don't have to be feminist to do that. People have been doing that for centuries, and feminism was not even a part of it.
No.
If we're still on the topic of autism and friends, it was actually one of my childhood friends who had mostly high-functioning autism, and another friend I made while I was in middle school was sort of in the same boat, and he's the one I more or less talk to now. And it's funny, I got both of these friends because we were all fans of video games. That's the one thing that I find ties a lot of people with autism together. But I did show him this article because occasionally I'll bounce ideas off of him of what we're doing. And the first thing he sent back to me was, fuck, with 5 years.
That's about right.
From the live chat, Duck, formerly known as Censor, says he's autistic. And Agent Smith says he's been accused of it.
Who hasn't?
Many of us
there are
have.
any misogynists out there. Oh yes, all of us. How weird.
Yes. All right, so fast forward 10 years, and we now have Autism Awareness Week, which this year includes a documentary made for Channel 4 and presented by Anna Richardson, who is not autistic. I find this hugely problematic. So did some of the youth patrons for Ambitious About Autism. They met with Channel 4 and now have presenting roles within the show too. But I remain disappointed that the lead presenter of a documentary, Are You Autistic, isn't. Okay, so how important is it then that the announcer be autistic too? I don't get it. They're just presenting.
You really want your presenter to be autistic?
Well, it's just it. It doesn't matter whether they are or not. But the thing is, what if they couldn't find somebody who was equipped and autistic? You know, what if they couldn't find somebody that was their forte and they were autistic? Because a lot of autistic people aren't very social, and presenting is a rather social job.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, it would seem that's it's like having a sports reporter that was going to interview a bunch of or do a presentation on the Boston Marathon, and they're in a wheelchair. I don't, and then saying that that's a problem. That shouldn't be the case. I don't think it matters. But let's continue. When I asked Anna Richardson this week on Twitter if she was autistic, she blocked me. which is one way to engage with autistic people, I guess. So the person who wrote this article is autistic.
So unintentionally, it's very unintentionally funny because it takes an autistic person to not understand why they were blocked by someone else for asking them, "Are you autistic?" That's
Well,
functionally.
someone else on Twitter that you couldn't ask if they're autistic. The doctor knows a lot about that.
This is what we call a thought-terminating cliche.
Yes.
And also, it's just a joke, etc.
Duck, formerly known as Censor, says a couple things. He says, I think lots of people on the spectrum can learn to be more normal. Most people diagnosed with Asperger's. And then he says, Frenchnator 2 says, so are they going to say that autism is toxic masculinity? I don't know. We'll see. Could be. I mean, aren't more men? Yeah, aren't more men on the spectrum than women? Like way more?
Significantly more.
Yeah, more men are diagnosed than women for sure.
But more women are diagnosed of something else than men.
It's like still like
borderline.
Feminist for autism. We need more women to have autism.
For equality.
No, we don't.
We need more women.
It says a little later on in the article, it's men and boys at an estimated 3-to-1 ratio. So there you go.
Well, and in the past, it's been.
Women have a 5-to-1 ratio of borderline, right? But we don't really talk about that, and it's difficult to really examine it, given that most psychologists are feminists and can't quite be trusted to examine women objectively.
Yeah,
I kind of wonder if in terms of autism, intervention happens earlier with girls because it is more abnormal for girls to be less social. And I kind of wonder if in terms of borderline, the opposite is true, because borderline manifests a lot in relational aggression, and relational aggression is normal for girls. I kind of wonder if girls get less early intervention when they're borderline because the behavior is not seen as unfeminine, whereas guys who are borderline and start engaging in relational aggression as kids instead of direct aggression are seen as unmasculine, and therefore they start to see more intervention.
That's interesting.
Like
that's a good question.
You get it, girl, and you deserve it.
Yeah, well, or at least, that's just, she's just acting like a.
Of course, you would behave like that.
PMS. It's not borderline. It's PMS. She's got really bad PMS. For 3 months, yes.
For a whole year, absolutely.
Of course.
One of the things, narcissists like to show off their bodies, and men in the modern age don't have many options for showing off their bodies, except in gay bars and such. Unless it's a really hot day, you can't walk down the street without a top on. Ironically, women can, just as long as the nipples aren't showing.
Yeah.
But, fuck, what was my point?
Was it about borderline and BPD or autism?
Probably. Oh, god damn it, I lost it.
That's okay, it's the after show. Alright. When I asked... Oh, the blocking thing. I tweeted Channel 4 and the production company Betty with my pitch to make a documentary about autistic women. They replied, "Hi, Nikki. Thanks for getting in touch. Unfortunately, we don't accept ideas from outside the company. Instead, you could go direct to a TV channel. Most channels have contacts for commissioners on their websites. Thanks and good luck with your idea. All of this is why, for Autism Awareness Week, I want to talk about how autism is a feminist issue." This is an autistic woman, supposedly.
So somebody said no to me once. This is why it's a feminist issue.
Yeah. Problems with diagnosis. According to the National Autistic Society, women and girls with autism are outnumbered by men and boys at an estimated 3-to-1 ratio. That isn't purely epidemiology. It also has a lot to do with gender bias. The diagnostic tests are framed by pre-existing study groups, and pre-existing study groups are framed by diagnosis, and diagnosis is achieved through GP referrals, and GP referrals are framed by symptoms, as defined by diagnostic tests. It would seem that all autistic roads lead to men. For women and girls with autism, unless your symptoms are pronounced or you have an accompanying learning disability. You have a high likelihood of one of misdiagnosis, late diagnosis, or no diagnosis at all. Like, you might not have it. What's a misdiagnosis mean? That you don't have it? So once you navigate the problem of trying to persuade a GP who isn't necessarily conversant with the female autism phenotype, girl autism, you are then met by a diagnostician who is working to the testing system, which is looking for male symptoms like aggression.
Phenotypes. What?
But as a woman conditioned to be compliant, to mask your true nature, to submit, to internalize your pain, to smile, to make friends, get married, have children, like makeup, enjoy music, well, that's when good old diagnostic sexism steps in and bites us on the arse.
I remembered my thing.
Of course.
Shit, did I? Oh, yeah. Can you call it narcissism if it's biologically driven? Because the thing I said about showing off your bodies, narcissism, one of the things is you show your body off. But what if women are sort of more evolved to show their bodies off than men are? Much like, other primates are evolved. The women are evolved to show their asses off, and the men are evolved to go nuts about that. So that's probably why there is actually a different zero for men and women, because to some degree we're evolved for women to show things off and men to compete over them. So it stands to reason you'll get more female narcissists and more male autists. There's nothing unnatural about it, In fact, it's pretty amazing that we found a happy middle ground.
One other thing that's interesting that Censor Duck was saying.
I think it was Billy Connolly who did the joke that women have to feel loved to have sex, and men have to have sex to feel loved. So we're fucked. We're fucked. Weird one.
That's a good one. Also sad. Censor Duck says aggression is not a male trait, which is something I was thinking about, because she says male symptoms like aggression. She uses that as a part of her argument, but aggression is not a male thing. So you have to have. I mean, Hannah was talking about relational aggression as a female trait, but women have general aggression just as boys do. It's just for female aggression usually plays out relationally. So, what is her diagnosis? We spend our lives trying desperately to fit in without ever fitting in, watching through a sheet of glass as our peers understand one another and all the social rules as if by osmosis. When we finally meet the one person trained to understand, we often get the worst rejection of all. That wasn't the case for me. I was lucky because my conflicted clinician consulted Dr. Judith Gould. He was sure that I met all the criteria because I presented so well, but that in his opinion, I deviated from the criteria because I'd done stand-up comedy and that did not fit his profile. Fortunately, with the input from Dr. Gould, who was a renowned expert on autism presentation in women and girls, his understanding was enlarged. I don't blame him. It's just that autism in women is so different that unless clinicians have a wealth of experience of recognizing and appreciating its distinct presentation, they will be unfamiliar with how often we mask our true selves. The consultation room is so far removed from the day-to-day reality of life with the condition as a woman, and we are often inarticulate in trying to explain it in a clinical setting. What if is she really autistic? I don't know.
Really, really wants to be.
Yeah, or does she just really want to be?
I want a disability. Please, God.
He wasn't there for my eating disorders or the decades spent battling sensory defensiveness. He wasn't there when I stayed silent about the domestic abuse I endured as a child, internalizing the pain and fearful of trusting people. He wasn't there when I self-harmed or contemplated suicide, or was bullied as a child and an adult, or when I was sexually assaulted, but too embarrassed to say anything about it. He wasn't there when, as a 7-year-old, I said something so shockingly unkind, my teacher slapped me across the face as a reflex. Yet, this is the truth for so many autistic women and girls. He was just working off the diagnostic testing system designed by men for men.
So they need like a dub version of the diagnostic tool.
Yeah, we need the female razor version, the pH balance version of
made for her.
Yes, strong enough for a man, but made for a woman.
By women.
How how would you test autism in women differently? Did she even say? Like, the list of problems she had sounds like stuff that women that have borderline also have, like eating disorders. And I've known crazy ass chicks that cut themselves that I dated, and they had eating disorders and all that stuff, but they were certainly not autistic. They were, if anything, histrionic and narcissistic.
I think what she's doing is diagnosis shopping, and then turning around and claiming that because she thinks that she should belong to a particular diagnosis, that means that it manifests differently in women than it does in men, which isn't the case. Mental health diagnosis has a particular set of symptoms, and those symptoms are what define what the diagnosis is. If you don't have enough of the symptoms of the diagnosis of the particular disorder, I mean to merit the diagnosis, that's not your diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
She spent too long reading the DSM-5 and going on with WebMD.
And she doesn't explain how female autism is different. And we're already at the last segment, and she doesn't explain it. So here's her last bit. She says, our stories...
It doesn't fuck with your mate worthiness like it does if you're a dude. Because autistic dudes, tend to lack the social awareness that it takes to find a mate. But if you're an autistic woman, you're basically a woman who doesn't give a fuck, and they're the hottest ones. And autistic women don't give a fuck in those particular sort of social areas that men and their general sort of zero autism aren't very good with either. Yep. So I don't know where they're going with this. And I don't know where I'm going with this either, because I haven't got any data to show that autistic women get laid more than autistic men. I guess
they're the best women to talk with.
Well,
just keep talking.
I guess that autistic women get laid more than men because women get laid more than men if they want.
It would make sense.
Yeah. So, all right.
And it would kind of make sense that borderline narcissist men get laid more than regular men, because in both of these cases, it's different. It's at least something different.
It's true.
Like maybe women really are attracted to men who express themselves too much, and men really are attracted to women who seem quiet but have something brewing up. If you see what I mean.
Censor Duck says, although I'm surprised that autism doesn't increase risk-seeking behavior if it is described as extreme masculinity. Then he says, I bet $5 that she doesn't have autism. Eating disorders are more of a case of narcissism. And then he says, I suspect female autists to be or look more like Alison. Sorry if I'm dominating chat a little bit. It looks like nobody else is talking, so it's fine. Yeah, I could see that. Alison's more in her own head, I don't know if that's autism because I'm not a psychologist, but
it's more neuroticism.
Yeah, she certainly is more neurotic, conscientious.
You need to talk about that in Dumpster Fire, Doge. Not here.
Not here. Okay, I won't talk about that here. Our last segment. Our story should be heard. Autistic women need to be seen and heard. We need to be recognized on the feminism and equality spectrum as well as the autism one. Jesus Christ, what was that I just read?
Autism, women most affected.
Clinical profession diagnosis autism. It's a man. Women most affected.
I know I have autism. I know that because this man said I don't. Most of all, we shouldn't be made to feel, as autistic women, that our stories are either airbrushed from the picture, as with the Chris Packham documentary Asperger's and Me, or directed and led by non-autistic people. We shouldn't be expected to be grateful that we've had to force our way into commissioning meetings about our lives. We should be pitching documentaries, as I've been doing for years, and actually get them commissioned. We can and must be an integral part of telling our story. Whether electively mute or hyperverbal, none of us should be silenced because the non-autistic people are speaking for us.
Electively mute?
You know, if you like,
Yeah, so what does that mean?
If they elect to be mute?
if you replace non-autistic
It means you decide to be
people
mute sometimes.
with men in those last two paragraphs, it still
Yeah.
kind of works.
It does. White men, capitalist men, Western men.
Cishet men.
So if
Yeah,
someone
cishet
does a
men.
documentary on starvation in Africa, it has to be one of those starving people.
It has to be a starving person, yes.
And we can't feed him, or else he'll no longer be starving.
Yeah, you got to make sure he stays hungry for the entire documentary. Can't feed him. That's basically what they're saying. If you make a movie about anorexia, the person that's doing the movie had better be an anorexic.
What am I going to be paid in? Oh, your pride.
If you do a movie
But
about
I need food.
if
No,
you
we
make a
can't do that.
documentary about cancer, the person doing it better be on chemo while they're going through the while they're making the film. This is retarded. Well,
Or make a documentary about dead people.
Go ahead.
So then, if you made a documentary about dead people, would that just be an hour of silence?
Yeah. The next time they do March
Well,
the Penguins,
It would be nothing because they'd have to try and get the dead person to start the camera.
yep.
Yeah, they need a dead person to ask for one first off, but for a movie first.
They have to get consent from him before they can start production. Well, that means that by that logic, Morgan Freeman and David Attenborough will never get work again doing nature documentaries. It's not going to happen. It's going to be all animals. They're going to strap microphones to them and then
It's a
wait.
pretty good idea, actually.
I would strap cameras to them, to the predators, personally.
Maybe some other kin or something.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
the
maybe we find
predator
some other
would,
kid.
PETA would light their hair on fire.
Not
Oh
if it's
my
natural.
god! You're exploiting nature.
That's right.
PETA don't do nothing unless it's getting paid.
I'll admit it. I mainly watched nature documentaries to see predators kill prey. That was the thing that I wanted to see the most, and they almost always put that in there. You know, I have the whole Planet Earth series.
Well, that's the money reel.
That's what people want to see. Well, that's what I want to see.
You have to wonder what's going through the animal's head as it's getting eaten alive by lions. I reckon that's what DMT is for.
Usually
I have this whole theory about DMT is there to make you just kind of drift off as you're getting eaten by lions. Because you're more likely to survive if you don't thrash around. Because the herd might come back and fight the lions off. I've seen it happen in nature documentaries. If you lie still, you've got a better chance of surviving than if you start kicking around. And that's why DMT floods your brain when you're about to die. Just
Actually,
a
Mike,
harebrained theory I have.
I can answer the question. The last thing going through the prey animal's mind is usually the predator animal's fangs. That would not land.
It was okay. All right,
Thinking
so
of just a bunch of videos of chimpanzees from other tribes tearing apart
they usually start with the faces for
monkeys
some reason.
from competing tribes. And they say we're the ones that go to war. We're the only ones that go to war.
Oh no, they absolutely bonobos do too. Absolutely.
What do they think ants do?
Yeah,
That's all ants do.
we call them army ants. All right,
That is
so
the entire purpose of an ant colony.
yeah, to dominate
They're literally colonial.
colonizers.
Ants don't sleep, you know. They literally don't sleep. I don't trust anything that doesn't sleep and doesn't die after 11 days.
Yeah, I got some ants in the house. Pisses me off. We got traps everywhere, but and you know, it's not the worst insect to have. I don't even know if I would call them pests, but I guess so. They're not the worst, like compared to flies and moths and.
What?
No.
What do ant traps look like?
What do what? Ant traps?
Ant traps, yeah. Traps for ants.
They're like roach traps.
No, they're like little ants with like pink wigs and penises. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
okay,
they're drones, but they look just like queen.
Yeah.
It would be a drone pretending to be a queen, wouldn't it? Like pretending to be enormously fat.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway. My dogs are barking at me. I'm going to wrap up the after show. Censor duck. Well, oh, is that her in the picture? Why is she smiling? That's not her. The person in the picture is Nikki Clark, the little button there on the side. The other two were the people who hosted the original documentary that weren't autistic, therefore problematic.
Huh.
All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us out of the after show. We have just learned that now autism also needs feminism, because the more things that happen to men more are things that actually affect women more, and they should be the focus of it. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get us out of the after show. And I hope you guys have a good night. It was fun.